In some shonen stories, there's this either emphasized or silent narrative of the new generation surpassing the old. There's also the trope of old men or women being ridiculously strong even compared to the younger characters in the story. This trope also exists in One Piece, and Oda has made it clear that in his fantasy he'd like to keep his older characters strong because in real life people tend to disrespect them. Despite being strong though, they're still not as strong as they were in their younger years, but they can still contend or in some cases be stronger than those in their prime. So I'll be covering each of the major generations to see if the trope of the next generation surpasses the last actually exists in One Piece. Before we delve into it though, if you're new to the channel or you just haven't subbed yet, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support as always is much appreciated. The inspiration of this topic actually came from chapter 1081 in the fight between Kuzan and Garp. Despite Garp's old age, he's able to take the upper hand against Kuzan, who's still in his prime and is one of the strongest of his generation. It does need to be noted though that Kuzan, as of this recording, is still holding back as Garp suggests, and the fight literally just started as well, so things can still change. The first time we've seen an old legend fight a younger top tier was in Shabondi when Rayleigh was able to fight Kizaru toe to toe, to which Sentomaru said that he's never seen anyone stop Kizaru before. Even though Kizaru was starting to take the upper hand as Rayleigh started to get tired in the fight, Rayleigh is an old man who wasn't even on Roger's level in his prime. Kizaru is someone who's comfortable with going out to stop Big Mom from meeting Kaido, and he's probably not even stronger than prime Rayleigh himself. However, the best person to demonstrate the point of this video with is none other than Whitebeard. Even as an old sick man, Whitebeard still held the title of the strongest in the world. Even Shanks acknowledged his position at the top when explaining Blackbeard's goal for reaching the top meant aiming for Whitebeard's seat. He was known as the King of the Seas and the closest to One Piece. It's only after he died that the true chase for the One Piece actually started, as he stood by the throne for 22 years as the ultimate gatekeeper. Some of you might be thinking Whitebeard couldn't have been the strongest anymore because he was sick, but that's actually my point. What if he wasn't? His sickness in Marineford hampered with his observation haki, and when he got a heart attack he would become a sitting duck. It's also only after Squado stabbed him due to his declining health that Crocodile called him weak and not the same man he used to be. Just because Whitebeard was old didn't automatically mean he couldn't be the strongest there was. Whitebeard still has one of the most destructive devil fruits in the story, and despite his decline, he could still clash equally against Yonko and Arboros in their prime. Imagine if the former Pirate King never had that illness and lived until his 70s. That's literally what Whitebeard was. Just so there's no confusion with the generations I'm referring to, I'll be separating them into three categories. The old generation being those in their prime during Roger's era and before. The middle generation are those like Shanks, Kaido, Dragon and Akainu, and the new generation are the worst generation and the future Marines like Kobe. The three main eras that will be important for this topic is Roger's era, which starts after God's Valley and ends with Roger's death, the Great Age of Piracy, which ended with Whitebeard's death, and the New Age, which is the era the story is currently in now. The start of the Great Age of Piracy and the New Age saw the biggest influx of pirates due to Roger's final speech and Whitebeard's confirmation of the One Piece's existence. The seas have never been more competitive than in these two eras. However, just because the era is more competitive, does that necessarily mean that the top tiers of that era are stronger than in the old? When it comes to the middle generation of pirates, one of the most common names that is said to be on the level of the Pirate King or potentially stronger is Shanks. This conversation seemed to be pushed even harder after he beat both Kid and Killer with the same sword style as the former Pirate King. There is no surprise that as Roger's former apprentice, Shanks would share some of his traits. As a kid, Shanks wanted to find One Piece. He was the first to inherit the Straw Hat, and he even adopted Roger's fighting style. It was even implied in Shabondi that Roger also believed that the Pirate King was the freest man, and in Shanks' Vivid card it stated that he would be the closest to being Pirate King if that's what it meant. It definitely is easy to understand why Shanks just has that aura that he's the strongest guy around, but it's for these exact reasons why he can't be on Roger's level. In literally every single way, Shanks is just one step short from what Roger was. Shanks won't be Pirate King. he won't be the freest man. He already passed on the straw hat to a kid with greater potential than he knew he had. Heck, he even has one less arm than Roger, and his crew, which is clearly structured similarly to his former captains, isn't quite as good either. I mean, his right hand man Ben Beckman has a similar dynamic that what Rayleigh had with Roger, and Ben Beckman just isn't as good as Rayleigh. Similar things can also be said about Kaido. As of this recording, Kaido has shown arguably the best display of power by fighting against every strong fighter of Luffy's alliance, and he almost arguably won. He can use every level of Haki to the highest degree, and is also the user of a mythical dragon Zoanfru. Kaido was propped up as an unkillable creature that was the strongest in the world after Whitebeard's death. Kaido believed he was the strongest there was, and not even Shanks, who he held in high regard, could beat him. Before his death, Kaido was known as the strongest pirate, the strongest creature, had the highest active pirate bounty at the time, and he died in a battle that kickstarted the final saga. If you haven't noticed, I've been drawing similarities Kaido has with none other than Whitebeard. However, just like Shanks with Roger, Kaido falls short in every way. Kaido was also defeated and surpassed by Luffy, and for those that might question this, I've got a whole video on this subject. Essentially, the main point is Kaido believed that the strongest in a fight is determined by their Haki. Luffy won the Haki clash, so at least in Kaido's eyes, Luffy became stronger. On top of the fact that Kaido only concedes inferiority to Joy Boy, and Luffy became Joy Boy by awakening his fruit. Even if you disagree with this, Luffy is still very close to Kaido in strength, and he's still not become the Pirate King yet. So from now until Luffy becomes Pirate King, the gap between Kaido's level and Roger will be determined by the power progression Luffy has until he reaches the Pirate King level. Now, when it comes to characters like Akainu, who could potentially be a setup fight against Luffy once he's Pirate King, they are the few that will be affected by the end of series power cliff. What I mean by this is that there could be characters that break the current narrative power ceiling. As of the post time skip, the ceiling of power that Oda set narratively was Kaido. He was known as the strongest pirate, the strongest creature who can't be killed, and it took the Sun God to beat him. Whether you agree with this or not, it can't be denied that Kaido had the strongest in the world narrative all over his character in the post time skip. When Luffy starts to put some distance between himself and Kaido as he gets stronger, Akainu being able to fight Luffy on a comparable level will have Akainu breaking the ceiling and therefore creating a power cliff in the story. Technically, this is just all my own headcanon, but personally I believe characters like Mihawk, Dragon and Akainu will be affected by this power cliff. Akainu has led the Marines to become the strongest it's ever been, even stronger than the days of Garp and Sengoku being at the helm. Akainu could potentially be stronger than Prime Sengoku, who was his predecessor as Fleet Admiral, and is also comparable to Prime Garp, who is comparable to the Pirate King Roger. On top of the fact that I already mentioned that Akainu could potentially be fighting Luffy in the final war once Luffy becomes Pirate King, so depending on the way that Oda decides to handle that fight, Akainu can be on the Pirate King level. As for Dragon, although he hasn't done anything in terms of combat so far as of this recording, he's someone I believe will be fighting against Imu, who's potentially been the strongest person all along but just been in the shadows, so Dragon could perform crazy feats from this matchup. Now when it comes to Mihawk, it's because he'll be facing a future Zoro who should have already surpassed Shanks when they finally meet again, as it's stated that Mihawk is waiting for someone stronger than his former rival to challenge him. Shanks is obviously amongst the 5 strongest alive as of this recording, and Zoro will definitely need to blacken all his blades in order to defeat Mihawk. However, like I said though, this is just my headcanon for Mihawk, Akainu and Dragon, but the main point is that aside from a possible power cliff for certain characters that can take them above the level of Kaido and into the level of the Pirate King, the top tiers of the middle generation aren't on the level of the former Pirate King Roger, let alone are stronger than him. Now that's not to say that no one can reach the level of Roger and Whitebeard or surpass them, because that privilege only goes to the very strongest of the new and current generation, which will be led by Luffy. More specifically, Luffy, Blackbeard, Zoro and Kobe. Now some of you might be thinking I missed out Kid and Law, but although they are leaders in this new era, they don't have the potential that these four have. In my personal opinion, Law and Kid's strength will cap off at Kaido and Shanks' level at best. They can be stronger than Kaido and Shanks, but they'll still be on that level, which is no knock to them because that's still amongst the strongest of all time. This idea that Luffy's main Shabondi rivals will be just like Roger's and will be very close to him in power the way Shiki and Whitebeard were is just unfounded. Now for Luffy, we all know that he will surpass Roger, but that's ultimately the byproduct of what completing his dream will be. By becoming the Pirate King, he would have trounced the Yonko and the Admirals, won the Throne Wars and surpassed Roger's legend. Now for Blackbeard, he will be Luffy's last pirate adversary and potentially his strongest adversary in general. As the former apprentice to Whitebeard, now wielding both Darkness and Quake Fruits and is potentially carrying the will of rocks, when Blackbeard reaches his peak, the bare minimum for his strength will be on the tier of the Pirate King. Whether or not Blackbeard will grow to become the strongest pirate ever though is definitely something I personally question, although it is very possible. The main reason why I question it is because Whitebeard says that Blackbeard isn't the one that Roger's waited for. This is obvious because we know Luffy is the one to accomplish what Roger couldn't and surpass his legend. However, there's definitely a narrative link between becoming the next Pirate King and becoming stronger than Roger. The Throne Wars is a massive battle amongst the major factions for who will conquer the seas and take the throne Roger left behind. Since Blackbeard won't be winning it, it's possible that he won't surpass Roger. Regardless though, Blackbeard will still reach the level of the former Pirate King, and depending on how Oda wants to go about it, he could become the strongest pirate in history. Especially once you consider the fact that Blackbeard is potentially carrying the will of Rocks and can become the next Rocks D. Zebek, and Rocks was someone that was Roger's strongest adversary, meaning he's arguably stronger than even Whitebeard, who was stronger than Roger. Blackbeard definitely has a strong case for being the strongest pirate to ever live. Now for Zoro, he's one of the main characters of the story with the dream of becoming the strongest swordsman in the world. Just like Blackbeard, he will bare minimum be on the level of the Pirate King, as he should completely separate himself from Mihawk after beating him. There's also the likelihood of Zoro becoming the strongest swordsman in history just based on the fact that it is a shonen story and he's the most important swordsman in the story who will be on the greatest pirate crew ever. If that's the case, then he would grow to become stronger than Roger too, as he's also a swordsman. Zoro is also compared with the sword god Ryuma, and although Ryuma's ceiling isn't clear, if Zoro is to be known as the next sword god, that could add to his narrative of being the strongest swordsman to ever live. Now lastly, we have Kobe. He will become the future of the Marines, as Garp said, and will one day become an admiral. He vowed to one day bring Luffy to justice when he becomes Pirate King, so in order to truly challenge him, he will need to at least be on Roger's level, if not stronger. Luffy and Kobe are one of those direct examples of someone in the new generation having a narrative to surpass their old generation counterpart. For Luffy, it is Roger, and for Kobe, it is Garp. So since Garp and Roger are practically equals, Kobe will more than likely surpass the former Pirate King. All in all, this idea that the next generation surpasses the previous isn't black and white in One Piece. Like it or not, the strongest of the old generation so far have been portrayed as the ceiling of power for pirates and marines. The middle generation top tiers are still some of the strongest of all time, but the only ones that could be comfortably put over the known power ceiling are the select strongest of the new and current generation. Hopefully that answered that question well enough for you. So if you enjoyed, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. That'd be much appreciated. I've been the one and only Zage, and until next time.